Blessed love, blessed love, blessed love, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about something that we don't necessarily like to think about, we don't necessarily like to talk about, but it is so intertwined with life that sometimes we just know we have no choice but to face it head on. And I'm going to be talking about suffering and dealing with suffering. Either you are the person that's suffering, or you're helping someone along the way as they go through whatever form of suffering. The reason why I think about things like this, and I hope people don't think that this channel is dark or grim or whatever, because I talk about some heavy things, but because I have to deal with these things on a day-to-day basis, I have to deal with these things internally. So I know a lot of people as well have to deal with these things as well. And though, social media many times is just all about, the highlights and all of these things, I understand and I acknowledge that there are a lot of people out there who will go through some real things, And I just want this platform to be as authentic and as true to life as possible. So, suffering. As a nurse, you meet different patients along the way. You deal with different cases along the way. And, there are some of them, there are just some stories that just stand out to you. There are just some stories that are some patients that you'll never forget. And I remember this particular patient that I had some time ago. He got hit off his electric scooter by a tractor trailer, right? And this guy was maybe late teens, early 20s. And it was just a sad story because his parents were there bedside day in, day out. They kind of alternated and took turns and thing, and it was just sad. I cannot forget this. It was so sad, and his parents were fairly wealthy people, and I was just thinking in that moment that, man, I'm sure these people would give up their wealth to get back them son, Like when I saw what they were going through at that bedside, I tell you, I knew that they would give up so much just to get back their son. And I remember that the guy, he was on life support for a while. He was ventilated for a while, and I remember when the surgeon, one of the surgeons came in, and she was talking to them about the realities and the prognosis and saying, hey, pretty much based on how it's looking, we can either pull the plug or we can prolong this, but then, he will not have any quality of life. And just seeing that these people had to make this decision, I will never forget it, And I remember the surgeon, if you ever work with doctors, especially surgeons, they have a way of many of them of being very stoic, of being very dry, some of them are very callous and very, they just stick to the data, they stick to the facts, they stick to the medicine, and the emotional part of it is lacking. But I remember for the first time, because I've seen that surgeon many times, and for the first time, I saw that lady, that surgeon, break down. She broke character. In that moment, she was talking to the mother as a mother. She was saying, mother to mother, this is XYZ. I don't know how you're dealing with this, but this would be my decision. She was no longer talking to her as a surgeon, but as a mother. And I tell you, I feel it I just turn on my head because as I said, the surgeon started crying, and I said, boy, rough. And I witnessed the suffering of the child and the suffering of the parents. And sometimes when I'm in those scenarios or when I'm in those situations, I feel guilty. I feel guilty because it's like I don't know, the right words to say. Sometimes I feel guilty because naturally I am someone who likes to encourage people, and then sometimes I'm just at a loss for words. I can't find the words. I cannot find the words because of the depth of the suffering that is happening around me, and sometimes I feel guilty. But today I was reading in the book of Job, and the book of Job, if you're familiar with the book of Job, Job was an upright man. Job was a man who was blameless, who was a godly man, but the Lord allowed, the enemy to touch his life in certain ways. He lost his kids, he lost his livestock, his wealth, and Satan even touched his body, and he was filled with sores from his head to his toe, and he went through an intense period of suffering. But there's a particular chapter, a particular verse that stood out to me today as I read it, and it has been giving me peace, for when I'm in those moments when I feel like I should have said more, I should have done more, but I just didn't, or I couldn't, and it's given me peace. And it is in Job 2 verse 13, and it says that no one said a word to Job, for they saw that his suffering was too great for words. So what had happened there was, Job's friends heard what he was going through, and they came to visit him. And it said in that verse that they saw that, guess what, his suffering was too much for words, and they just sat in silence with him. It was only their presence that was felt, and then them never say nothing, right? And it was showing me that, guess what, there are just sometimes that words will never be enough, and it's just better to be silent. And I hope that I will remember this moving forward, even like not just on my job, but even as a believer, as a Christian, as I try to encourage people or give people advice. I hope that I will remember, and I'm encouraging you to remember as well, that sometimes it is okay to not say anything. Because sometimes the suffering is so much that the things that you say or the words that you say will come off as being insensitive. And I read down, in one of the commentaries, and it was saying that, and I will read what it said. It said, when people are going through severe trials, ill-advised counsel is distasteful. They may listen politely, but inside they are upset. Be slow to give advice to those who are hurting. They often need compassion more than they need advice. Sometimes people, when they go through suffering and hardship, they need compassion more than they need advice. So, yeah. Trust me, suffering is a thing that it's a sensitive. Everybody faces suffering different. And there's another thing that I have learned about suffering, even through my job, is that perspective is everything. Perspective is everything, because I have had patients who, when me tell you, say them go through it like rough pain, day in, day out, Whether it is like, you can imagine being short of breath for the whole day, short of breath for the whole night, being afraid to fall asleep because it's like you're afraid that you just now you're going to sleep off and you won't wake up. I have observed these things face to face, one-on-one. I have seen this, and there have been patients who I have had who went through this, and when I say suffering at its highest, at its peak, and they maintained a positive outlook. They maintained, this approach to life where they were still kind. They were still nice to whoever was treating them, to whoever, the nurse, the doctors, or whoever. They still would try to offer encouragement, to the healthcare team or whatever, even while they were going through these things. While on the other hand, I have had patients who suffer same way. They're suffering, and they are the meanest people. They are the meanest people. They will tell you words when it exist in the dictionary. You understand? Day in, day out, and they are miserable. You understand? So sometimes we blame situations and say, oh, it's because of a certain situation why people are a certain way. But as I said, and I understand as well that everyone will not be the same way. But I have come to realize that perspective matters. That people choose how they respond to the suffering that they go through. You understand? People choose how they go through, how they respond to the suffering. And even going back to, I hope I'm not rambling, even going back to that, the parents for that young man that I was talking about, they were going through so much, and in that time they could have been lashing out and being, just angry at everybody, but they were the calmest, nicest, most welcoming and warm people I had met in a while. You get me? So it's always about perspective. So even as I was, thinking about suffering today and learning how to go through what I must go through at different points in life, or helping others to go through what they must go through, I want us to remember today that it is about perspective, and to remember that we have to be sensitive. We have to try to be as sensitive as we can, especially when we don't understand. That's another thing. Sometimes we don't understand, the will of God, and especially as Christians, we rush to judgment, or we rush to diagnose, or to say why God has done this, or say things like God knows best or whatever, when we really and truly don't have a clue what God is doing. Let us not be hasty. Let us be present while people go through suffering. Let us also endure suffering as best as we can, because guess what? This is a part of life, and it is what it is, So as I meditate and think about this, I hope whatever I share is encouraging to you. Yeah? Blessings.